All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to SOSA's Road to ExACs. I hope everyone's having a great week so far. My name is Tushar Negi, and I will be moderating today's event. A little about myself. I moved to Canada in 2015 from New Delhi, India, after graduating with a bachelor's in architecture in 2012 and working for about three and a half years there. I'm currently working as a project manager at WZMH Architects, and I wrote my ExACs in 2018, and I got licensed in January 2020. So before we begin, I'd just like to take a few minutes to speak a bit about our organization, SOSA, or Society of South Asian Architects. We're a not-for-profit organization that was formed in 2021, so just over a year ago, with a mission to promote a culture of diversity and inclusion in our professions, and as well as to provide students, professionals, and even newcomers to Canada a platform to network and collaborate. So we are also going to be doing some lecture and education Q&A series in the future. So do look out for our posts on our website and social media channels. I will just drop a link to our website in the chat after I'm done chatting here. So speaking about Q&A series, we are very happy to have Feby, Kuriakose, and Vineetha Sivathasan join us here as panelists for this ExAC Q&A session. Feby is an associate and project manager at NOR, and Vineetha is an intermediate architectural designer at Supercool. All right, so I'll pass it on to them to say a quick few words before we begin. Feby, we'll start with you.
Thank you, everyone. Hello, and welcome to this Q&A session. My name is Feby Kuriakose. I moved to Canada in 2009. I did my architecture from University of Bangalore. I studied in Bangalore. I grew up in Dubai. I went back and worked in Dubai for a number of years before I moved to Canada in 2009. I was very interested when Tushar contacted me, because when I wrote my ExAC, which was back in 2000, I want to say 15. I know, Tushar, I did send you the year that I wrote it. One of the things that I faced was, because I did not study here and I was relatively new to the architectural profession here, just getting information about how to go about collecting even the reading material that's required to prepare for the exam. So, you know, from the time that I wrote my exam, what I've been trying to do is making sure that the information that I gathered, the experiences that I went through, the way that I worked on studying for the exam, that I'm able to pass it on to people who are in similar situations like me. So I hope I'm going to be of help to you guys today, answering any questions that you might have, along with the wonderful panel that we have here who wrote the exam much after me. But I'm hoping I can give you some insights about the profession and any area that you may not have been exposed to or have questions on. Thank you.
Vineetha.
Nice to meet you all virtually. And I'm currently an intermediate intern architect. And I wrote my exam quite recently, 2019, if I remember correctly, or 2018. November of 2018. Tushar, please correct me, because I told you the date because I had to double check. Anywho,
I think I saw you in the exam hall. Just kidding.
It was fairly recently, and a lot of people wait a bit longer to actually write the exam while they gather their experience. But I just wanted to sort of get a head start. As soon as I had the 2,800 hours that I needed, I decided to write my exam, just because I'm in the study mentality, because I graduated from University of Toronto and I sort of knew how to have the mentality of studying. So it's just like, okay, I can have that structure in my head to go for it. And that's what I did. And to echo Feby, I felt the same way about, I don't know where to start, or there's so much content that we need to cover. So anyhow, I'll be happy to help you guys with any questions you have about where to start and how to start studying and what's the best way that worked for me. And a little bit about me would be, I work at Super Cool and as an intermediate intern architect again, and I'm hoping to get my license soon. I'm almost there. It's a long process. We all know this. And I'm also part of BEAT, and I got involved with SOSA because I'm South Asian, and there's no other organizations like this, and I'm happy to be part of it.
Thank you, Feby and Vineetha. So let's, I guess, Billy, start with the event. So just to keep things in order, I would request you all to keep your microphones on mute and keep typing your questions in the chat anytime throughout this event. We will pick them up in that order, and you can unmute yourself at that time when the panelists take your questions. So to kickstart this event, I will quickly share a poll with everyone. You should be able to see it on your screen. It's just to get an idea of when you will be writing this exam, if it's going to be Feb or March, just in a month's time, in November, or if you've just simply not decided yet. Just to get, I hope you can see that on your screen now. I'll just give a couple of more seconds and then I'll close this poll. Good. Looks to be pretty tight so far. So how many attendees do we have? We have 33 here. We've got 20 responses. All right, just 5 more seconds and then I'm going to close this. So it's fairly divided, but most of you I can see are giving it this year. So I guess you have a lot of questions today for our panelists. All right, so you can start typing your questions on the chat here, and we'll start taking a look at them. Just to get things rolling, maybe I can start with a question for the both of you. So the one thing that's the most intimidating is the NBC. Experience says that. So how would you say, how do we study NBC efficiently during an exam, before just preparing for the exam? How do we really go about studying for section 2?
Should I go?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
First of all, I think the most important thing to remember is you're not really studying, right? Because the NBC, it's a code. So, and it's an open book exam. What you're really trying to do is understand how the code is structured. That is the most important thing, because in the time frame that you're given, and ExAC does have, in their preparation information, they say, so many seconds or so many minutes per question as how much you should spend on each question. So what you really want to do is efficiently use that time that you have. So when it's an open book exam, it is really important to understand exactly where to go to find the information that you're looking for. And also remember, when it is a question related to a code, you might have to look at multiple locations to arrive at your final answer, right? So to be able to navigate the code is very important. And one of the things that I found very helpful for me was I took the admissions course fairly close to the exam. And the webinar that they had on the code section, it was a couple from Ottawa, I can't remember their name, the way they spoke about how to navigate the code, and they used the example of the code matrix. So if you use the code matrix, do a code matrix for any project within your office. that will make you navigate the code and really understand exactly where to go to look at how do you calculate the occupant load for a project? Where do you look at all the various sections? For me, that was the most helpful thing. So I actually asked to do the OBC matrix because I was working as a project manager at the time that I was writing the exam. So I actually went to 4 different groups, 4 different types of projects. And I said, let me do the OBC matrix for you because I really need to understand how to navigate the code.
That's a great way of looking at it. Yeah. Because I did the same thing. I looked over the OBC matrix for the projects I was working on and then used those sections on code to sort of go back and forth. And you will be using a physical book, I assume, because we had to use a physical binders. So I don't know if it's online. I don't know how that works nowadays, but so because you just need to know how to flip to the right section. So you need to be able to navigate to the right sections. That's it. You don't need to know the answer off the top of your head. You don't have to memorize all of it because that's the scary part, right? We automatically think we have to memorize the whole to like part 3 and part 9 and all of it. And we don't. We just need to know where to find the information for the questions. And we were allowed to use sticky notes to like tab each section so that it works. And I actually took the RAIC webinar on part 3 and part 9, and your firm might be sponsoring it, or you can pay for it as a group and watch it together. And that webinar for NBC was really, really helpful. Because they do kind of go through and they give you example scenarios sort of thing. If there's a mezzanine in this building, how would you determine if you're allowed to have the mezzanine or not, or what is the occupancy load? Like they'll have random questions that you can kind of try to go through questions and try to find the answers to. So it helps you navigate through the exam. I'm not preaching for RAC's webinar here, but I found that to be helpful as somebody who never used a physical book. The way that they went through it really helped me. And tabbing the way you would like it to tab, what really worked, color coding and whatnot was really helpful. And another thing I did was I had a study buddy, random person that was doing the ExAC. And we actually asked each other random questions from the code. And then the other person would have to kind of try to find it. So we came up with questions for each other. Like maybe 30 questions each, and we try to do the questions ourselves and to see if we can find the answers to those questions. So you don't have to study inside like by yourself. You can study with a bunch of people and prep questions for each other. And then you learn some things from each other because you learn different things and you're on different typologies at different firms, right? So multiple things about different parts of the code. So don't memorize the whole book until all sections. You don't need to do that. You don't have to do that in real life because you're usually control Fing anything anyway. So as long as you have a general idea of what section to go to, and that's how it'll be helpful for you.
Yeah, exactly. I second those thoughts. I would just say that if there's one thing that you need to maybe memorize or just understand is the index, what lies within the NBC and where exactly. So with that, I guess we can go on to the next question. Ronnie is asking a quick overview of the 4 exams and the type of questions.
Sorry, Tushar, if I may just jump in very quickly. Since we were talking about the NBC and the code, there are a number of questions that just came up about the code. Do you want to just go through those first and then we'll jump to the next topic, or I just thought that might.
Let's just take a few more code questions. So there's one from Hoda. Which part of NBC should be memorized to be prepared for the final exam?
Can I answer that? None.
Yes, please.
None. Do not memorize the code. You cannot memorize the code. Yeah. Like Tushar said, the one thing that you should know, it's more than memorizing, it's knowing the sections of the code, right? It's knowing what is part 3, what is part 4 and 5 and 6 and 7, and knowing what is in volume 1 and what is in volume 2. Mm-hmm. That is also very important. So memorization, none. It's really understanding what goes into it.
But my question about the design part, because I mean, we should understand and memorize a part of the code to be, because in the design or final exam, we don't have open book. We have to understand like and memorize a part of the MBC to review and answer those questions, isn't it?
Not from my experience. Because the code part of the exam, there are certain things about how a building should be organized that you should know, but not so much in memorizing the code.
Understood. Thank you.
Exactly.
All right, next question is there a ratio of part 3 and 9 questions? Is it 50-50? So I think that's a bit of a tricky question to answer. We
can never say.
We can never say. And I can't really go into the specifics of how much I was asked in the exam because we're under oath here. But yeah, I would say that, and then Feby and Vineetha, you can definitely jump in. But part 3 definitely is very important, including 3.7, which is the health and safety requirements. So when we talk about public safety and our role as an architect in administering that, right? So the most important things are life safety and the barrier-free, design requirements. So those two are quite essential, I'd say. There's a few more items like the Appendix C and D, which is the calculation of the building envelope R values and the fire performance ratings of the materials. Those are really important. But I know most of us work in firms that are usually working on bigger projects, so we use part 3 and all, but part 9 is kind of also very important from the exam point of view. So do not miss on that, even though you've not worked on part 9 projects a lot, but don't disregard that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say as well, because if you work in excuse me, if you work in firms that are working on large projects, the chances are you have never touched part 9. So it's very important when you go to the exam to understand how part 9 is structured and what is the difference between part 3 and part 9 and when each gets applied is an important thing to review and understand.
I think there's a lot more calculations involved in part 9 than part 3. That's what I found it too, because I predominantly worked on part 3, and it was a bit of a shift to kind of understand part 9 and then go from back and forth.
And if I can say something that might actually, hopefully it's going to relieve your stress a bit. Mm-hmm. I did not know that part 9 was as important when I went to write the code. Went to write the exam, and when I saw the questions, because you understand the code, when you read the questions, okay, this is the section that I need to go to, right? So actually my exposure to part 9 mostly happened at the exam.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is where knowing to navigate the code is the most important thing. If I could do it, anybody can do it.
There's a question about, can you write on tags, or is that not allowed? You can definitely write on tags. You can't write a whole paragraph or things, but if you have the small tabs, you can write, organize it any way how you would use a sticky note, the smaller sticky notes, and you could write and highlight in the NBC. I don't think you're allowed to do big paragraphs or whatnot, but if you want to draw small diagrams in order to understand the content, I have done it. I've seen people do it during the exams. I don't know if that I don't think it counts as plagiarism, because you're just translating what's written in a diagram, right? So you're not cheating in any way. You're just a visual learner, which I am. So it helps to see it kind of drawn the detail out, so you can indicate, okay, the stair has to be this depth, and this is what they're talking about when the nosing has to be this much, sort of thing. So you could definitely do that. Only thing is, if you want to sell the NPC after to another person, they might not want those diagrams, but that's the only thing that I would be careful about.
Right.
There's one question here actually that I would like to address, whether anything related to structures and other services related to code. So Ronnie, are you asking about the other sections of the code, like part 7, etc.? Is that what you're referring to? And if so, yes. Yes, you don't have to know in depth, but you need to know what is in those sections of the code. And trust me, moving further, it will really help you in your career as well. The more you understand what's in those sections of the code, the more it'll help you in your career as well. So yes, you should definitely know. You don't have to read the code end to end. You just have to know what is in each section.
Yeah, that's very true. One more question here about code. Are there a lot of calculations in the code section?
Some related to, structural members, fire resistance ratings, calculating the member sizes based on required rating, things like that, which are available to you in the code. So it's not, again, it's intuitive. When you read what they're asking for is information that's available easily within the code.
And it's not crazy calculations because you're not bringing a scientific calculator.
Yeah.
It's a regular standard calculator. So it's not going to be, you're not going to be using integrals or calculus or in any form. So you'll be all right.
Yeah, there could be questions for like calculating occupant load of a space,
Yeah.
or even the building envelope RSI requirements for a particular building type. Those are really interesting. I love doing those. And it's a bit of a switch between OBC and NBC. So when the exam portion was done and I was back in the office, I had to flip again to the OBC mode.
Yeah.
Yes, very important thing to remember. While the OBC is based on the NBC, there are differences.
Mm-hmm. And just make sure it's the right version of NBC or the right year that's going to be part of the exam. There have been confusion if you get a free copy or you buy a used copy, it might be an older version. So just make sure the version that you're using to study for the exam is the one that you're going to be tested on. So all that information would be on the ExAC website.
Yeah. All right, I think we can go back to the top. The first question was a quick overview of the 4 exams and the type of questions.
So the type of questions is not really something that we can discuss. The only thing that we can say is your best resource to look at the type of questions that might come is the ExAC website itself. There are sample questions there. Overview of the 4 exams. Now I'm going to rely on Vineetha and Tushar, who wrote it a little after me because, I don't entirely remember how they were structured. Tushar, if you have that, the sections from the ExAC readily available that you can pull up, that would be great. The thing to remember is between the 4 sections, you cover everything that you would do as an architect, all the way from business development, really, from site selection to the programming and all the way till occupancy and warranty review. So you're going through the entire life cycle of a project. And that is how they have structured the exam as well, right? Section 1 is really all that pre-design services, not just pre-design, it's pre-design, design, all the way to design development is all encompassed in that section 1. Section 2 and section 3 is really where you get into the actual construction documents and reviewing the code and really understanding how to detail that project. And section 4 is how that project then gets constructed. What you do during, as an architect, what you do during the bidding as well as the construction phase of that project. So really the 4 sections, it's so vast the most important thing, I always say that the people who are the most successful at the exam are the ones who have the most experience, because you're not relying so much on reading material. You're actually relying on your experience and what, examples from your daily work environment, right? That's as much of an overview as I can think of. I mean, I'll leave it to Vineetha and Tushar, who prepared for the exam a little after me.
No, I can't say it any better than you have, actually, because if you have done a project from start to finish, then you kind of have a holistic idea of some of these points and some of the sections, if I can, yeah. And if I could go further, it's more about, like you said, like when you look at a project being divided at a firm, this is probably the section that, they might have it divided in certain sections, and how you start a project to how you end it is how the exam is going to be. Only thing I can say is that you might be working on one typology. Just, if you're designing condos alone, then you're more familiar with that versus custom homes or commercial buildings where they have different structural systems and, different materiality. And those are the kind of things you might want to do more reading on or understand more. And what I didn't know much about wood construction, so I kind of had to ask my coworkers or the projects that they worked on, and just, ask them if you could look at their drawing set that they did for, wood construction house or building, right? And just study about it and learn what they did and how the detailing is done and what material was used. And you can also talk to the project manager about some of the things. Or if you want to talk, like look at how a contract is, and you can ask them, can I have a look? Because I don't know how this contract actually looks like. Right? I'm sure your project manager or your a boss wouldn't say no to that, as long as you keep the information confidential and whatnot, and you're not sharing it with other people. Another thing I found to be helpful, again, like having a study group, but you don't have to meet with them every day or every week. You can meet with them once you finish one of the sections and then review with them, because they might know something that you don't know. And then, collectively sharing resources and studying together that way, where has helped me in some ways, because I was able to gather notes from different people and go there and consolidate everything and then create my own notes sort of thing. So, and then I divided my studies into different sections, like how it's listed on what's on the screen. So all my notes are under those bullet points, then it would just be written that way. And that's how people have been studying, because I looked at everyone's notes and kind of wrote my own and then added together. And it just worked out. It helped me kind of, it sort of helped me organize my thoughts, because there is so much materials and we can't gain 10 years of experience in the short time to get like the 28 hours, or in 5 years, you can't gain that much experience to be like, oh, what is it? Like, what is this? What is this material? How is this thickness? It doesn't come that fast. So, so I think the best way is to just, yeah, I don't know what the best way, yeah, it just see what works for you.
Yeah, I think that's very well put, both Feby and Vineetha. The only thing I'd like to add here is if you're preparing this in a flow for the exam, section 1 and section 3 kind of go one after the other. I would put section 4 right at the end, because that's after the contract has been signed with the contractor, right? The GC is on board, and that's all the processes that are happening after that. So, and section 2 is the NBC, which is not going to happen between section 1 and section 3 of a project. It's going to happen throughout. So keep section 2 as a flow while you're studying section 1 and 3, but there will be a lot of correlations between the material that you're studying and preparing for section 1 and 3. And I believe there's another question here about that was there in the beginning, what to expect for section 3 final project and the best resource to prepare for it. So I think that when you go back to the website of ExAC, I believe there are some study materials here, right? And they have a whole list of literature that they recommend. And speaking within the industry, there's a few books out there. I think the one most popular one is the DK Ching. I think everyone goes to that. And if you look at the contents of that book, it's pretty much in flow with section 1 and 3. Like it starts with your site analysis, your coordination engineering systems, and then reaches your final construction detailing of the final project. So that book kind of helps you bind section 1 and section 3 preparation together.
Yeah.
So that would be helpful. If you can study section 1 and 3 together, it kind of makes more sense.
Yeah, I kind of second that. I think if there are two books that you absolutely must read, it is CHOP and DK Ching. Those are the two must read books, because you get the most amount of information. Not to say that those are the only things that you should read. There is much more that you should, but those are kind of the, at least I found, CHOP, of course. I mean, you can't get away from reading CHOP. But Ching had the most information there related to the most number of sections, or the most content from these sections as identified here.
Yeah, if you want to ease into studying, I started off by reading CHOP because it's an easy read and it's very clear and it's organized quite well, and you can read it on the subway and highlight as you go. You do a pass one time just to ease into studying mode, and then you go into Ching, and then you can come back to CHOP because you'll probably you'll forget what you read, so you'll probably have to come back to that. So that's kind of what I did. And Ching, like one of the person asked, there is a lot of detail there. So you kind of have to gauge on your own to what level of detail you need to know, because there's like different type of nails and different types of, they go into real like nitty-gritty details. So depending on how much time you have and how much you can actually memorize, or how much you're interested in learning, that's the difference, right? If you're really interested in learning about it, then you might go into the nitty-gritty detail. If it's something that you know for a fact you're not going to remember on the exam, then there's no point in trying to memorize something that's that nitty-gritty.
Right. So the one thing, sorry about that noise in my background. The one thing I want to second there, though, is, and I think Yelena asked a question, do we need to know our values of different insulating materials, or rather the principles of what R value is? Definitely know the principle of what the R value is. Do you need to know the R values of different materials? It's information that you will use in your everyday life. Always think about how would you use information in your career, right? Nobody sits around with memorized values. Building materials are changing constantly. What we rely on is the most up-to-date industry information that is available. So the way the exam is also structured, or the way ExAC or this exam wants you to understand things, is also like that. It's understanding the principles of things. It's less on memorizing. I mean, you need to know, what do you need to memorize? How do details come together? How do you put a building together is what you want to know. Not so much about values that you're memorizing. And that goes for not just, construction details. It's also for, let's say, cost management. Nobody is expecting you to know the unit rates of everything. It's just not possible. There is industry standards for it that people, even the cost estimator, uses industry standards in order to do those cost estimates. So understanding the principles of things is what is more important. To what level of detail should we memorize it? Like Vineetha said, that's left to you, because really nobody can predict what's going to come in the exam.
And I have to say, memorizing might work for maybe until you write the exam, but after that, you're doing it so that this is your professional career, right? So you want to learn this, not just memorize it and get it out of the way sort of thing. This is going to help you in your careers, at your job, and until whenever you decide to to become an architect, right? And so memorizing might help during the exam, but you just need to know that it's not the only way to do this. You can try to learn it as much as possible and see if you'll remember it even after the exam. So understanding the bigger principle is the key to doing this.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And just going back to UAE's question, for the preparation of Section 3, especially in Ching, there are a lot of details, which I agree. To which level of detail should we memorize? So here is something we should understand. You definitely cannot learn everything or memorize it in such a short period of time. But what you need to understand is what are the more important aspects of building construction. So like in that book specifically, they talk about structures and they talk about building envelope, and then they talk about exterior cladding materials, and then they move on to smaller interior finishes and all of those things. Now, you should understand that the most important things are the structure and the building envelope and how we detail them. So just review the different kinds of envelope details. That will really help you. And don't memorize these details. Try to understand why they're done a certain way. There's a lot involved in it. There's insulations involved in it. There's waterproofing involved in it. And just understand the principles of these two. And I assure you, there will be a lot of confusions clearing out when it comes to building envelope. If there's less time, I'd say just skip the less important parts like interior finishes. No, I doubt there will be like a lot of questions about the tile size and different kinds of interior finishes, right? So there's always a lot of stuff that you can omit while preparing, especially with a vast syllabus that is provided in that book.
And Tushar, if you scroll down to that document, the PDF, they break down the sections into more nitty-gritty details, right? And if anything that you're reading pertains to any of these, then I would say it's important. And anything that doesn't, you can just put it on the side to come back if you have enough time.
Yeah, actually, that's a very good point. The breakdown of how each of these sections is organized and how ExAC has broken it out, that is a very important tool to use as you're studying, because things that are outside of that realm, definitely read them, because it'll always help you in your career, but focus on how ExAC has structured it. The ExAC website is your best resource. Sorry, I'm not sure which part of the questions you're at, Tushar, now. I see a couple of questions here for calculating RSI value. How will the information be provided? I don't remember.
It depends on the question. And
sorry about that.
I believe for calculating RSI values, this kind of question would, from what I understand, would only be in Section 2, because this is a very code-specific question.
Yeah.
And it's just about, as we spoke earlier, it's about knowing how to navigate through different sections, because this is a little complicated if you don't understand, right? So I believe you have to, they'll probably ask you what the RSI values for an opaque structure in a commercial building is in zone 5, let's say, or they'll just give you a city name. And you'll have to go into that, I think it's Appendix C, right? The seismic data, where you get the information about each and every city. And then from there, you get the 100-degree days. It's a little bit complicated, but I think that's the process. See, I'm back in my OBC mode, so I apologize. But I don't really remember how it was done in NBC, but I'm sure there's somebody in the office, in your office, who could explain it a little more better. But yeah, it's just about navigating from different sections. I think there's 2 different sections where you can pick up the information from, and you can calculate the RSI value for a specific zone type for a specific building type.
And again, that is where you should also use the resources from the office, right? Talk to people around you, talk to people who are doing it day in, day out. They can explain it to you the best and walk you through a real life example. There are a few questions here. Sketching of details allowed as answers, or is it only writing?
Don't remember, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't remember that either. I don't think there were any, I don't remember doing any drawings.
I would just read through the ExAC website and see, they will tell you what's allowed or not. And if a question does require diagrams, then they'll specifically say you have to draw diagrams. That's what I'm guessing. I figured out what I had to do during the exam, sir.
Yeah, I think there's a section in the ExAC website where they tell you what kind of questions come in. It's most of them are fill in the blanks, true, false, short answers, and long answers. As far as I remember, there weren't any questions that required sketching, but I could be wrong. You should definitely check the ExAC website for that.
Yeah,
they clearly mentioned which type of questions they would ask.
Yeah, and always be wary of what the person who has written the exam before tells you, right? Because the exam may not be structured the same way when you go to write it. So, you know, it's important to hear from others, but also prepare for it based on what the ExAC website says. That's very important.
And don't hesitate to reach out to a person from the OA if you have specific questions about how the exams are done and what these are, and they will definitely help you or direct you to the resources. Don't ask a week before the exam because they're going to be busy prepping for the exam. So if you have questions, try to ask much earlier so you'll be clear.
Yeah. All right, the next question is it important to read all the CCDC documents?
Yes. It's important to read them all, just so you know what each CCDC number relates to. What is a CCDC 2 versus a CCDC 5A and 5B? It's important to understand that. Again, you're not memorizing the CCDC. And if you have read one, you will understand it's structured in a very clear, concise manner. So, you know, and once you read through it, it's really understanding what is the difference between them than, you know, memorizing all of them. So it's just, should you read them? Yes, absolutely. You should read all of them. And some of them are actually guides to the CCDC. Some of the numbers are guides to another number. So it's not really a CCDC contract.
And I the admission course videos definitely helped in identifying what contract was for what and with whom. So if you did attend the admission course closer to the date, or if you have the notes, I would also review that because that definitely helped with knowing the different types of contracts, along with CHOP. Both of those together would be really helpful.
Yeah. I guess one more thing I'll add to that is definitely read through all the CCDC documents. It gives you an idea of what kind of contract it is. It also gives you an idea of the different kinds of contract, and that OA admission course will definitely help with that. And then there are sections within the CCDC contracts. There's general conditions, there's supplementary conditions. So you should just know a little bit about what exactly comes under these things, these sections, and what are the differences. From experience, I can say that the most important and the most commonly used CCDC contracts are CCDC 2, that's the traditional stipulated sum. And then a lot of clients use 3 and 4 as well. 4, not so much in the architecture industry. The construction management contract is 5A. 5A is just for services, and 5B is for services and construction. So in most of the cases in bigger projects where you have a construction manager it's most of the times it's going to be a 5B where they provide their construction forces as well. And then some of the design build, I guess, I haven't worked on any of those, but I believe there are a lot of firms that that do provide design build services here as well. So those are the 14A and 14B. So it's just about learning the differences between the type of contract, and the content within each contract is quite standard. They have the general contract, the terms and conditions, then they have general conditions, supplementary conditions. So you should know a little bit about that.
And again, feel free to ask your boss or project managers to even look at the templates of the contracts that they have and they sign with people, just to read over to understand. So it's more experiential learning versus just trying to memorize the contract, which you shouldn't do. Just you don't have to memorize all the contents of the contract.
Yeah, that's the important thing to remember.
All right, next question. Are there any particular sections from CHOP we should focus more on?
Not necessarily. I think, again, for me personally, it wasn't a difficult read. It was a very lighthearted sort of read that I was able to do on the subway. There's some sections they go on and on about, like, what is the education requirements that you need. Those kind of things we already sort of know. So I didn't pay too much attention to it. I just read through it quite quickly. There are some important things like the contract, or what is the role of an architect or a contractor, or, what you should do and what you shouldn't do, and what is your duty as an architect, and how are you liable and where you're not. Those kind of things, as soon to be architects, I think it's important for us to know, and to like drill it in your head as something that you should always know even after the exam. So those kind of things I would try to remember as much, or read over it or whatnot. I think there's also sections on like how you would set up a firm, or what you need, what type of practices are there, and how does a sole practice work versus like partnership. Those kind of things would be important if you decide to start your own firm, or even try to understand how your firm is working. Is it incorporated, or is it partnership, or is it sole practice? It's good to know those things as people who are working in the field. And I notice a lot of firms do use a lot of document templates or drafts that they have in CHOP in order to set up their practice, especially like the site visit checklist, or what to do when you go to a site, what you need to check for and what you shouldn't be checking for. Those kind of things are important to know, even as a practicing architect. So just focus more on that.
Yeah, I'm going to second what Vineetha said. It's important to read CHOP right through, because it talks about a lot of things that we should know as architects, not just as as a licensed architect, where you're liable, what your roles and responsibilities are, and those are all important things for us to know. And if one day you want to set up a firm, understanding what are the different types of firms, or what are the different ways in which you can set up a firm, and of course contract administration. That part of it, because that's a big part of the exam, right? Like preparing for the exam, understanding your office and field functions of contract administration is very important. So really do focus on those parts of the CHOP. And like Vineetha said, as you read through, you'll see that there are sections related to education, continued education, things that you will read through, but don't particularly have to focus too much on. And then there are things, as you read, you will gravitate towards it because it is of personal importance to you.
Yes, great points. The only thing I'd add is the way CHOP is divided, it's mostly talking about management of the practice and management of the project. So as Vineetha had mentioned about what kind of different practices are there, and what are the roles of an architect and different stakeholders in a project, those kind of things are all under the management of the practice. There's so much to read over there, and it's a really good read for everyone to know and understand. The other half, the management of the project, that's a bit more aligned with your section 1, section 3, and section 4 as well. So When you're studying other resources as well, there's going to be a lot of information that you can, correlate to with this part of the job as well. And as Feby had mentioned, the contract admin part, I think CHOP is a great resource for that. It covers the whole contract admin portion beautifully. You could definitely read some additional CCDC documents, and then the OAA admission definitely would help you with the Section 4 information. But yeah, management of the practice is more aligned with other resources that you'll be studying for Section 1 and 3. All right, next question is Ankur. Since most of us will be preparing for the exam along with our regular work, how many hours, weeks, months of preparation is required to be ready for the exam?
I could take this. Depending on what type of learner you are and how fast and slow you can retain information and forget about them. So I'm a very slow learner. I have to write everything down and write it down multiple times in order for me to retain that information and remember it and understand it. So I started probably for I want to say 6 months before. And when I mean I started, I made a schedule for myself and put goals. I try to reach them. Sometimes it's really hard when it's summertime and you just don't want to sit there and study. And I took my exam in November. So I started studying 6 months prior to that. And in winter, you don't want to study. It's too cold and, you have deadlines, which is really, yeah, like you said, it's full-time work. And if you're volunteering on the side, you have family responsibilities, volunteer. So you just had to make a schedule for yourself and say, these are the 4 sections. This is my study material, and this is how I'm going to be doing that. So you can spend at least 2 months trying to gather all the resources that you actually want to study. So I would say talk to people who have written the exam and get notes from them, get notes from few people. You don't have to get it from everyone because that's going to be overwhelming amount of information and that's going to be too much. And then once you have what you need to study, then you'll have a game plan. And I allocated about a month to read CHOP, which is too long for sure. But I thought, okay, I'm only going to be reading this, half a weekend or 4 hours a week sort of thing. And I set that's the time. I didn't allocate for how long Ching was going to take me because I miscalculated how much detail that was there. So I had to go and readjust my schedule and spend more time on Ching. So once you know the study material, you'll be able to sort of focus on what to study for. And if something is taking you longer, then you need to spend more time on it. And then 1 month prior to the exam, maybe 3 weeks, you'll just leave it for reviewing so that, you're not studying everything until the last minute. Because if you start 6 months before, you'll definitely forget what you studied on the first month. So you'll have to go back and review that. So if you have a few weeks prior to the exam to review, my firm at that time was really great enough to give me time off, paid time off to actually study. So I took 4 or 5 days off to actually study every day prior to the exam. But it could get overwhelming because the exam is nearing, and take 1 or 2 days off or half a day off to relax. So don't study the night before because it could get pretty overwhelming. But just having a schedule and writing down how many hours you want to allocate that week and sticking to that would definitely help. And it's harder to study if you've been working for 7 or 8 hours, and then it's really hard to push yourself to do 4 hours of studying. But if you do 1 hour of reading, I think that's pretty good, better than doing no hours of studying, I think. So you just kind of be rigorous about it. That's my take.
Yeah, I'm gonna second that. The most important thing is, at least 6 months before the exam, know what you're gonna read. Yeah. It's not important that you start reading. It is know what is it that you need to read based on really understand how the exam is structured, what are the different sections, what is the reading material in there. So once you have that understanding, it also varies on your level of experience. Because if you have, let's say, like when I took the exam, I already had, 12, 13 years experience, maybe 15, I can't remember now. And I was working on every aspect of the project, all the way from pre-design to site plan approval and working with authorities, having jurisdiction, doing building permit reviews, meeting with the plans examiner, and I was doing contract admin. So once you know what you have to read, it also gives you an understanding of, okay, these are the things that I have done in my working career. So I understand how these things are structured. I have not done this aspect of it. I need to put more focus on that. It really helps channel how and where you need to apply more in terms of broadening your experience. So I would say, like Vineetha said, at least 6 months before, just get an understanding of what you need to read, create a plan, and most important thing of all, closer to the exam, do not keep a lot of, this is not like you're in university. Don't try to cram everything in the end. It doesn't work because you don't know what's going to come in the exam and all of that. So really, just leave those last week at least to just review all your study notes or any study notes that you have gathered from other people. Really focus on just reviews and get as stress-free as possible, because stress is the worst thing you can have when you go to an exam. Because when you're sitting down for your exam, make sure you read the question carefully. Read it. Don't try to rush through things. Really understand the words that go into an exam, into each question. Because then you will start, once you start reading the questions, you start relating it to either something that you've read or an experience from an actual project that you have worked on. And that is what will really help you. One last thing to say before I hand over to Tushar is, for anyone who hasn't done the admissions course, try and do it as close to the exam as possible, because I personally found that the admissions course was a good review material. They touch on so many different topics and it becomes a really good overview of things that you need to know as an architect, as a practicing professional, and also things that that would really help you with the exam.
And one other thing my project manager said with respect to taking the exam when I asked her for advice was that, most people don't go through all the questions, but once the exam is there, make sure you know how many questions are there. And if you only have an hour to do the exam, just know there's 100 questions. Then you have, is it 3 hours for the exam? I can't remember. But you have 3 hours and 100 questions or 150 questions. I'm not sure about how many questions will be there. I can't remember, but just know what the questions, how many questions are there, and allocate time accordingly. So if you don't know one question, don't stay there for 5 minutes trying to figure it out, because you have 200 more questions to go perhaps, right? So if you don't know, put a star beside it and move on to the next question, kind of thing, because you want to get through as many questions. People don't realize that it might be too many questions or too little questions, and they've spent 10 hours on one question. And yeah.
Yeah, really good points there, Feby and Vineetha. I would echo your thoughts as well here. I personally started my preparations so I gave them in November, and I probably started at the beginning of July, so just about 4 months. But before that, I reviewed all the material which Feby touched upon. It's really important to know what you're going to be studying, and you base your schedule on that. And one tip I would give is, and it really works differently for others, like for example, some people prefer group studies, some people prefer to study alone. During the final few days before the exam, maybe 2 weeks, a lot of people in my office were taking time off to study, but I thought it would be more constructive if I just have the final 2 weeks in the office while I'm working on the projects I work on, while I'm still doing code stuff, working on details in the projects and having a continuous conversation with my teammates. So that kind of just pumped me into the whole architecture exam mode. And it turned out really well. So that worked out for me. So just go with your own flow, whatever works for you best. This is not the first exam you've given, so you know how you usually prepare for an exam. So just go with that. All right, so next question was, it's again a CCDC question. Isn't it more repeat information in each CCDC? Well, yeah, that's true. So again, it's just about reading the content once. There's most of the information is generic, more legal terms. But what you need to do is understand the differences and the contract types under each of the CCDCs, and just the contents, the table of contents. Most of them are same in different types of CCDCs, though. That's right.
Yeah, that is. It's exactly what Tushar said. Yes, there are repeat information in CCDCs because they're all contracts. But the important thing is what each number means, because each number is a different type of contract. So that is the important. It's important to understand that distinction.
Great. Next question is, how concerned should one be about all sections of the National Master Specifications, NMS?
You should know the spec section.
Yep. Yeah, you should actually, this is part of CHOP as well, I think, and you should just go over the division names. At least that's the least you should know, each division name and what comes under each. Specifically division 0 and 1, because those are more contractual based, less project based. If Feby and Vineetha want to touch on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, see, it's important to know all the divisions, right? And you'll realize that once you've done your exam and you understand those divisions, the way you read the spec after that is going to be different in your work environment, I mean, for your project. And my recommendation would be to take a project spec from your office and a project that you have worked on and go through that, how that specification is structured, because nothing beats a real life example, right? When you're reading something abstract versus something that you have worked on. And like Tushar was saying, see how division 0 and division 1, division 1 is general requirements. It's important to understand what goes into division 0 and division 1, and they're structured very differently in different projects, different types of contracts. So really my one advice would be to, when you're trying to learn the different sections of the spec, apply it to a project that you're working on, use a real life specification as your example to understand what goes into it. And yes, know all the spec section, like just know them. You don't have to go into too much detail, but it's knowing the number and the division, like what section it is important.
I completely agree. And I did what you said, Feby, in terms of looking at the specs that we wrote for a project and kind of going through it and understanding how it was done. And it was quite helpful, because otherwise I'm just looking at numbers and names, and it doesn't translate as well as attaching it to a project and knowing where everything sort of works.
Yeah. All right, so next question is, I have already done admission course, but can we do it again when the exam is near?
I don't think it's necessary.
No.
I hope you've taken notes, because you can just read over that. And they do provide you with I believe, a PDF. So you can just go through those. I don't think it's necessary for you to retake it. That seems like a waste of time.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there are the PDFs, and I think in some cases there are some webinars that I've actually seen. They might be available on the OA website, maybe. I'm not entirely sure. But if really what you want to do is refresh yourself, right? Like you have gone through the admissions course. So if you go through the PDFs, you go through those webinars, it refreshes your memory. And now that you've read some of the material, really the way you see those that information and the way you retain that is going to be different. So you don't have to take it again. If you haven't taken it already, is what I was trying to say, then it's beneficial to take it closer to the exam because it becomes this refresher.
Right. Agreed. And okay, I think there's just one last question here, or a couple of more. I've heard about the flashcards on some websites. How much can we rely on those?
I personally use them. I don't know if they're reliable at all because the answers might be complete. I don't think all the answers are correct, but it helped me sort of. I used to use them when I'm walking to work, and I'll just, just click on a flashcard and see what the question is and see if I know the answer myself, because they already have sort of questions that's prepped for you. So you'll see if the questions are useful in some ways. I'm not sure how reliable they are, to be honest. I feel like the answers might be always completely correct, but you guys could correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I never used the flashcards. I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to, though in my research, one of the things that I came across was a Quizlet, thing on, and it just came up in a Google search, right? Not so much the content of it. How that helped me was more in timing myself in answering a question to really understand. So it was more on techniques because I came from an environment where I had never taken exams which were multiple choice. So for me, the format, because I did not study in Canada, I did not come from an environment where exams were structured in this way. And it didn't help that I was out of university for over 10 years at that point, right? So for me, the way those things helped, or at least this Quizlet helped, was in just understanding how multiple choice questions are structured and how long will it take me to read the question, read the answers, and actually process it in my brain. Those are the things that help me. Flashcards, really the way I dealt with flashcards is I made my own. So things that I wanted to read, topic that I wanted to touch upon, I created flashcards. Like Vineetha said, when I'm on the subway, I can just, have a quick look at those flashcards on certain topics that I want to try and remember. The sections of the specification, make up a song. Yeah. It's use whatever helps you remember. Use mnemonic tools, or use whatever helps you retain certain information.
Yeah. I had color-coded flashcards for you.
There you go.
So Vineetha,
every month sort of thing. So
there's a follow-up question for you about those flashcards. What are the name of those flashcards?
Oh, I think it's Quizlet. That's the one that I use.
Yeah, I use Quizlet as well.
But the questions or the answers more critically, because if it's it might not be relevant anymore. Some questions might not be.
True.
But the answers might not be relevant, but the questions might still work. And if you know the correct answer, or even to where to look for it, or if you feel like, oh, shit, I don't know this. So what it helped me was sort of provoke me to be like, oh, I don't know this, so I should look up where I can find the answer to this. So, and then I looked at the answers and sort of compared, oh, is this correct? This doesn't seem right, but what I'm reading seems more up to date. So I'm going to go with that one. So it was only during the beginning of my studies when I was a bit clueless as to how to go about doing this. So it helped. Once you get into the rhythm of things, you'll know how to navigate better.
Yeah, that's very true, actually. I think into your second month or so of your preparations, you're in a better position to judge for yourself
Yeah.
if a flashcard system would work better for you, or if reading and understanding things and writing your own notes would work better for you. So you'll be in that zone, definitely. All right, so one last question here, and I think then we'll stop taking questions and have a bit of a more organic chat when we want to hear you speak now. It's less putting in questions in the chat and more speaking up. So the last question is, how much is it important to read yardsticks for costing estimating? What do you suggest for cost estimating? This would have been my question if I was giving the exam this year, because I was truly stumped with cost estimating. I hadn't prepared properly for it. So any advices, panelists?
I'm not sure, because there are so many different, I mean, one of the things I would say is it's important to understand how the different types of cost estimation there is, right? It's important to know that at various stages of the project, what is the type of estimate that can be prepared. It is important, at least when I was reading it, so one of the things to remember is typically, especially if you work on large projects, you have a cost estimator that you're working with to provide these cost estimates, right? So it's important to look at cost estimates that have been prepared on your projects in your office and at various stages, starting from an order of magnitude estimate to a class D, to a class B, to a class A. And if available, look at it on the same project, if multiple cost estimates have been done on it on the same project. Because what that will really demonstrate to you, one is how the estimate has changed, because as more and more information is available, how the estimate changes. And you'll also start seeing what yardsticks they used to do those cost estimates at the various stages. So what book did I use? I mean, Hanscom's unit price, what is it called? The Hanscom unit price.
Yeah.
It's called
information that's available.
Yeah,
now
the yardsticks for costing.
Correct. The yardsticks for costing is it's important to look at it and see how information is available to you in the industry, but also remember right now what you're reading is more to write in the exam, right? In the real world, you rely on industry standards and those change. Like anyone who works in the construction industry can tell you in the past 1 year, the significant differences in what is going on with the construction industry. So while these yardsticks are important, and yes, that is what you should rely on for the exam, but beyond the exam, as professionals, you should also start thinking about how that gets applied in your profession. Because really, I'm hoping what you guys take away from today is what you're doing is not just for the exam. It's really preparing you and giving you the information to become a well-rounded architect and work in your profession. So I know I went a little further from what is the specifics of what you were asking. What is how much is it important to read yardstick for costing? It is important to understand how they do the costing. Not so much, you can't really read it. Like if you have opened that book, like how do you read it? You can't memorize the unit price for everything in every city and region, and it's not possible. But what you're really understanding from it is how it is structured, because it's structured by city and the unit price changes by city. So it's important to know those things. Not so much, again, memorizing does not help you. Understanding things is what, because you know, I don't know, in the exam, how will that question be structured? They might structure it giving you some information that you're using as a parameter, right? So understanding how to use those parameters is what's important.
Right, it's understanding how to use the tables that are already there in that book and how we usually use those to create our estimates. That's, I think most of the questions that come in are probably going to be around this. It's going to be general like that.
Yeah.
All right, so that's the end of the Q&A session. If there are more questions, you can feel free to just unmute yourself, ask some questions, or maybe if you need any other helpful tips or useful exam tips, let us know. We're still here. We have about 10 more minutes.
Yeah, like Tushar said, now we want to hear more than just the three of us talking.
All right, quite a quiet patch. So if I guess if there's no more questions, maybe we could conclude the meeting. And if you do have any questions after the event, just feel free to email us. It's team@sosatoronto.ca, or you could also connect with Feby and Vineetha on LinkedIn. All right, so you will also be receiving an email in the next few days to just fill out a short survey about this event. Let us know how we did. It will really help us improve this for the future events. And the one last thing would be, just before we finish, let's maybe switch on our cameras for a group photo. I guess this is my favorite part of an online event. And we'll just take one quick photo if everyone's down for that. Arvind, hi, I haven't seen you in so long.
I know. How are you?
Good,
And
good.
yeah, thank you. So first of all, yeah, thank you, Feby and Vineetha, for this wonderful tips, and like, yeah, it's kind of like adding confidence on us. So it's pretty. Thank you for that. And Tushar, so thank you so much for arranging this.
No, there were so many requests coming in, and I thought it's just around the corner. It would be really helpful if we do something like this. It was a little late in the game, but hopefully for future ExAC takers, we will be a bit more prepared.
Yep. Okay.
Okay,
Yes.
so
yeah, we really hope this has been helpful. We are just talking from our experience of how we wrote the exam and the things that we did that helped us. So we're hoping this was useful, and wish you all the very best as you prepare for the exam. And like I said, the most important thing, don't get stressed. It's go there, read. The less stressed you are, the more you're going to read the question and focus on what you're doing. That is the most important thing.
And it's already an achievement to get to that point, because that's what I kept telling myself as my brother was driving me, because I don't think I was able to drive, and so I was so nervous. But it's already an achievement to actually to do your 2,800 hours and do your admission course. This is not an easy process, right? It's not easy at all. So to actually having studied for that long without without going crazy, or maybe I went a bit crazy at times, but to having that sort of achievement is great. So just think about that. There are people who do fail, but you don't fail all the exams. You might fail one or two. So you can start again, right? You can do those 2 exams and you'll know what to look for. If you do have to retake it. And there's no shame in retaking, because I met some of the smartest architects I met who didn't pass it, one of the easiest exams, maybe, and it could just be because, that's memorizing is not their way of going about that exam or this exam, right? So don't be too hard on yourself. Getting there is a great achievement.
all right, thank you so much, everyone. Once again, we'd like to thank our panelists. Thank you, Feby and Vineetha, for joining us and helping us out with this Q&A session. And we wish each one of you all the best for the ExACs whenever you're taking them. Hope you ace them. And thank you and have a nice evening, everyone.